Hello, Aklit. Thank you very much for agreeing to talk with us and to share your experience as a pioneering MIM student at INSEAD. Let's start with your academic profile before joining the MIM at INSEAD.
Thanks for taking out the time. Before the MIM, I did my bachelor's in engineering from India, and I did my bachelor's in information communication technologies, it's kind of like a mixture between electronics, communication, and computer science. So I was
Mhm.
always like interested in emerging tech and everything new coming up, which is why I chose to do the MIM because um, kind of like exists on the crossroad of strategy and implementation and everything. So it was kind of like a good segue from being purely technical to actually using that into the market. Because if you're purely technical, like where do you go from information communication? Probably satellites, right? So I did not think I was capable enough to build a satellite, so I decided to do a MIM, and that's pretty. No, I'm kidding. Like that's not the reason, but it does exist at the crossroads of technology and emerging markets. So yeah, that was the primary reason.
Were you planning to work internationally at the time you were applying? I mean, were you considering a relocation or something in terms of your career goals?
Yeah, so after actually my engineering, I was working in France already. Um, and that's another thing, like because I'd worked and interned in France before and Netherlands before, so I kind of like worked internationally even before the MIM. So
Mhm.
definitely like being an international citizen and working internationally kind of gives you a more balanced nuance when you apply for a management degree, because it's like you're not just going there for the academics. Because of this, you like realize that there's, I mean, more that you need to learn, and especially like when you've worked in different countries like India, France, Netherlands, all three of them have a very different and unique culture of working. So the nuances of management and just like how you can better portray yourself, better portray others, better portray thoughts. That's another thing that I felt I could take away from the MIM, and I was, yeah, it was a positive experience based on that, I would say.
Yeah, and besides INSEAD, have you applied to other programs and which programs, if it is the case?
Apart from the MIM, I also applied for like a bunch of other disciples, particularly math, because I was very interested in math. So I applied for like research in math, more like PhD programs. I'm not going to take names of schools, but that was more towards the US.
Mhm.
Then yeah, I did apply to a few other MIM programs, but it was always like there was a certain amount of priority between the others, and INSEAD kind of had the higher priority when it came to my list.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, congratulations. I think you did a fantastic program. I think INSEAD in a couple of years will beat all the other memes that are currently in the market. So INSEAD has campuses in France and in Singapore. Can you tell us more about how it works in terms of the choice of campus and what was your approach?
Right. So when you say choice of campus, I mean, one thing to consider is that when you do a MIM, it's kind of fixed, right? Like you do the first 6 months in France for sure, and the next 4 months in Singapore for sure. I think it needs to be mentioned that there's also optional field trips, out of which you have to do at least one of them in
Mhm,
China, Abu Dhabi, and San Francisco. So yes, they do have campuses in France and Singapore, but it makes sense to
mhm,
also consider that they have these other auxiliary campuses. I mean, I shouldn't say auxiliary, like they have other campuses in these three locations. Um, so yeah, coming back to your question, the way it works is you do 3/5 of your program in France, where
mhm,
you'll be dealing with more of the basis of what constitutes a business. So that's like the very basics of it. Like, you'll do valuation, you'll do financial accounting, marketing. So like you build a base in France is how I see it. You build a base in France.
mhm,
And then you come to Singapore and you expand that base into more niche things, because that's when you're thinking about your electives, you're thinking about what you want to do. And of course, at least how I look at it is the last 4 months are also heavy recruitment seasons.
mhm,
And um, being in Europe, you've seen like the European landscape, and being in France, you of course have access to different markets. So like coming to Singapore, you get access to a very different market. Just like they recruit in different ways, they work in different ways, they have different requirements, they expect different things. So yeah, I think it gives you like the best of both worlds. And there's another small field trip, although because of COVID we couldn't physically be there, but I'm hoping you guys will. The 22 batch in Abu Dhabi, right? So
Mhm.
it's kind of like a good transition when you think about it, because there's a huge difference between France and Singapore, and like Abu Dhabi exists on like a transitionary phase between them. So yeah, I think that's how it's planned geographically and philosophically. And then if you end the MIM, you can go all around the globe and work in San
Mhm.
Francisco, or like do a field trip in San Francisco. So yeah, it's I would say the one promise of INSEAD, which is diversity, really shines in this fund, because you're being truly international. You're experiencing, I'd say, the extremes of doing business in every scenario. So yeah, I think that's the reason, and that's how they structure it to take you around, so to say.
Mm. Sounds like an exciting program. How important is it to know French to study and work in France? Because you previously mentioned that you worked in France. And how easy is it to pick up some French?
Okay, so I'll start with I mean, this is all my personal experience. I can't say if it's highly generalized, but I'll just share my experience. When I came to France, I did not speak French. I mean, I knew a few words, but I could probably understand very basic French. Could not reply in it, definitely. Picked up French pretty much in France while I was working in 2018, and then I came back in 2020. I would say when you work in France, you definitely need French. At least from my experience, it's very hard to work in English. And even if you work for an international company, there's of course like interpersonal relations that you have to build all the time. So you do need French to a huge extent. Um, then coming back to studying in France, from what I've heard, and I have no way to verify this, bachelors. I mean, you probably know more about this than me, but bachelors in France, of course, need French to some extent. I'm not very sure how credible this information is, so I wouldn't put my name to it. Masters in France. So I before joining INSEAD, by the way, I also did a short course with ISA, which is like a petroleum school. It's
Mm-hmm.
an energy school, but I did a course in gas and petroleum. So because it wasn't really a master's course, it was more like a diploma course, but 5 7 weeks, I think. And yeah, I did not need French for that. So I'm assuming the trend is that you need French till like a bachelor level, and you don't need French on a master's level. And definitely at INSEAD, like you do not need French. Like I don't think I ever felt the need to learn French at INSEAD or even use whatever French I'd learned. In fact, while at INSEAD, I learned German, got my B2 certification in German. So it's a very international culture. Like you do, I mean, you're not bound by the fact that you're in France. Like the way I look at it is you're in a very international space, and it just happens to be in a country that primarily speaks French, but that in no way affects you.
Yeah, definitely. I can second that and say that the only the only time probably when I speak French is with the staff at the cafeteria, who is, by the way, bilingual.
Yeah.
And yeah, the ecosystem of INSEAD is definitely very unique compared to the other French schools, and I can definitely agree with you on this point. So
In
I
fact,
would
like,
actually.
sorry, I'm going to interject you on just one small detail here. Like, INSEAD's in a small town, right? Like, Fontainebleau is a pretty small town, so you don't expect people to speak English much. But I feel like because of INSEAD, people are so used to people coming in from all countries that a lot of the shops and restaurants as well, like, you can very easily get by with just English or pointing and stuff. And so, yeah, it's kind of built a very international culture. So it is truly business for good, if I can use that line.
Definitely. And now, actually, because you finished the MIM, key highlights of your experience as a student at INSEAD. So during the program, maybe, I don't know, there were some interesting parties or meetups or maybe some activities. Could you tell us more about this?
Yeah, so I'll start with the first point that you raised parties, right? So we were there during a lockdown, so we did not have a lot of parties because it wasn't legally allowed.
Mm.
Um, yeah, we just had a few get-togethers, which were, I mean, we could do them because we were in the cafeteria, etc. So that constituted a party for us as long as the batch was together. Um, Coming back to the next point, like personal life, right? So yeah, personal life during the program, like I said, it's very international. I had this
Mhm.
one thing where when the program started, I decided I was going to have lunch with a different person every day in the cafeteria. And that's how I
Mm-hmm.
got to know my batch actually. And a lot of people actually did that. That's how everyone kind of met, got comfortable with each other. So, and the good part about INSEAD is like, I remember, I think it was P2 when a lot of things closed and stuff went online and they didn't have an option. Some people went back. So I could still go to campus and sometimes, I mean, they had takeaway lunches, but I could like have lunch with an MBA. I could have lunch with a PhD or like a prof or anyone. So like there's just this culture. I don't know. There's something in the air of INSEAD that just makes people approachable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'll be honest, like before joining INSEAD, I probably wasn't very approachable. I was kind of introverted, would not probably accept to do something like this. But it's given me kind of like the confidence to be out there and say, yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable enough to talk about the stuff at least that I know about. So yeah, that's kind of been like a good personal development.
Yeah, I love the spirit of INSEAD. Give, give, get.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
And the lunch experience is also what I'm trying to do. So I think that's the best way to get to know, meet people. Yeah. So how does it feel to be part of the pioneering promotion of the MIM in these uncertain times? In those uncertain times.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, when the program started, like the pandemic was peaking, right? And not just in France, but I would say globally, it was pretty much on the peak. But, and then again, not going to take a lot of the names, but I know a lot of schools shut down. They went completely online because
Mm-hmm.
like they just weren't able to handle it. But the one good thing about INSEAD is we at least we started completely physically. There was no restrictions on that. The only thing was like they we got tested every week and it was all sponsored by INSEAD. It was completely smooth. We didn't have to worry about anything. There was a portal. You could just upload your certificate allowed on campus and everything was automated. So it wasn't like you could be sure that someone who's not tested within that 1 week period isn't going to be on campus. So you know it's a safe space. Um, so even during a pandemic, they were able to like build a very safe space for students, which I think is a huge deal. Then coming to that, of course, like because it was a pandemic, so everyone was a bit skeptical about the job market, but there's a lot that goes behind this, I would say, and their planning was done in a way that you know when you kind of like complete the whole program, you get this huge like you are exposed to a lot of sectors, so you know how to tackle these different sectors. Like, okay, some sectors aren't doing well. That doesn't mean that you're not going to find a job in those sectors. Like, it's just going to be a different kind of struggle. Like I come from an energy background, right? Like, so I knew that, right, okay, oil and gas is severely affected by the pandemic, but that doesn't mean that I am going to lose any prospects of a job. Like, so the kind of the way I would say, of course, like the pandemic did affect NCR, it did affect our experience. I'm not going to deny it didn't. Like, we had to sit with social distancing. We couldn't always be on campus. Sometimes our teams worked offline, which actually was another good part because you learned how you can have like half your team with you and half your team outside, which is something that I'm still doing at the workspace. But the point being that in one way it did build resilience, but it didn't build resilience in a way that everything was falling on you. They took
Mm-hmm.
up, like the admin specifically and everyone involved with the program, they took up a lot of the stress to make sure that you weren't thinking about things that you weren't supposed to be concerned about. Like, of course, you had to be concerned about your health, making sure that you were following regulations, but as long as you were following them, um, I mean, you were fine. You weren't really thinking about, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be safe on campus. Yeah, honestly, I never had a concern about that. So I would say that they're a pretty good job. And I'm by the way, I'm a huge germaphobe. Like, I cannot leave my house without a bottle of sanitizer. So if I'm saying that, like it, I feel like it does mean something.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Could you tell us more about the format of the program of the MIM? How do you find experience? How did you find the experiential learning opportunities? So they're also known as the practicals.
Yeah, personally for me, since I mean I did my engineering before, so practicals have always been a huge part of academics. And that is one thing that I feel is extremely important. And instead, like when you finish your exams, it's not like, okay, so we're done with this period, right? Like, we're never going to use this. Just to enforce the fact that everything spills across different disciples. the practicals are scheduled and monitored in a way that you realize that, okay, if it's a practical, say in P1, you have a practical on marketing. So you're not just going to be thinking about marketing, you're going to be thinking about, all right, so I also learned this in data analytics. So how much value does, what I'm getting, like what's the value of that information? What does it mean on a financial context? Because you also learn financial accounting. And I wouldn't just say they try to like cover that period. Like when you move towards P2, P3, P4, like anything, you realize that a lot of the stuff that you did in the previous practicals and a lot of the stuff you did in, I don't know, like P1 or P2 or maybe even P0, and you're just doing art of comms and stuff. So even that stuff kind of like spills over to the practicals towards the end. And then it's perfect because you finish with a practical and then you start working, which is when you realize, oh, so all the practicals and all the theoretical learning, like it's all coming together. And it sounds pretty wishy-washy when you think about it that way, that, oh, like, yeah, I'm not going to use strategy or like blue ocean strategy or I don't know, macroeconomics in a workplace, but you do. Implicitly every day you do. So yeah, it's well structured, I would say. I I can't be sure if they actually like structured it in a way to have this, but it's clear that a lot of thought went behind it because you can see like there's a very smooth flow, and I hope you have the same experience, especially when it comes to information. Like it just flows very naturally.
So diversity, as you previously mentioned, is part of INSEAD's DNA. With a high concentration of international students in the program, how do you find the support that the career services provide, given that it is the first year of the program?
Okay. Yeah. So I think it's kind of a layered question. So let's go one step at a time. Let's talk about
Mhm.
first, like let's talk about the diversity, and then let's try to connect it to career services, right? So like you said, like of course there's a lot of diversity and a lot of people. It's not just about where you come from, it's about what you've done as a background, it's about where you want to go after the MIM. Like, I mean, call it ignorance, but I never knew someone would want to work in public policy after doing a business degree. Like personally for me, I would never have thought that, but the fact that I saw people motivated towards it meant that it's something that's worth considering. And then of course, like um so INSEAD's an old school. It's not new, right? So they've always had career services, but the career services are, of course, more used to dealing with mature audiences because of the MBA. But at the same time, the really good part about that is that I don't know how it works in other schools, but there was no bias or anchoring that they had that, oh, you guys are so young, maybe you wouldn't be able to handle this, or maybe you need more spoon feeding or you need like hand holding. It wasn't like that. It was very, it was how you would experience how you would want to experience a professional counsel. Like if I'm getting professional counseling, I wouldn't want it to be hand holding and telling me what to do. Like a lot
Mhm.
of people would assume that just because you don't have a lot of experience, you need that hand holding, but that's really not the case because at the end of the day, you know what you want to do. You joined the program for a specific reason.
Mhm.
So having that more mature mindset within the career team, I feel was a good thing. And then, of course, like the career team, the way it's structured as well is that they have career teams focusing on different locations and also present in different locations, right? So um, within Singapore, for example, like there's someone who focuses on tech in Singapore, someone focuses in consulting in Singapore, etc. And that team sits in the Singapore campus. So they, of course, like they have a direct engagement with employers and you get to interface with them directly. And even if you're in France, but you're hell bent on, I don't know, working in say tech in Singapore, like I was hell bent on working in tech. So I knew that there's kind of a filter, right? Like when you open an Excel file, you can just go to like filter and filter down everyone who works in tech, and then you can look at the locations and see who your point of contact would be. So more than anything else, I would say just the structure and the fact that it's more mature and they treat you like you're someone who knows what they want in life. That's for me, that's one of the standout factors.
Okay, thank you for sharing. And now let's move on to the INSEAD clubs. I think you were part of the Energy Club, if I'm not mistaken, or you were a MIM ambassador.
Yeah,
Could
the
you tell
energy
us,
club.
yeah, could you tell us more about what opportunities does INSEAD provide um, with these clubs, student clubs?
Right. So there are student clubs, and then there's also the student council. So the student council is kind of like the interface. Like, for example, there's going to be an academic student council, which basically deals with the academic issues or concerns or queries that you might have and takes it to the relevant levels. And similarly, there are student clubs, and our job, like I can speak for the Energy Club, was basically to look at employer engagement. And a lot of times it's not just about jobs, right? Like a lot of people aren't sure if they can crack into energy. So like maybe you just need mentorship or you're interested in some things. Like I know people who'd never worked in energy before, but they were interested in ESG. So
Mm-hmm.
I could help them explore more fields, get in touch with companies, use my contacts and get them to them. And then of course, like there's a network within the club. So one thing that we started off was kind of like a mentorship program, and
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be there pretty much in every club. Like tech did it, consulting did it, energy did it, and I'm pretty sure others did it as well. For example, in the energy club, we got alumni from INSEAD who've been working in the energy sector for like 10, 15 years, have a lot of experience. They've dealt with people who've graduated from other master's classes. So they know what kind of expectations to have, what you can have as, I mean, your ambitions. So um, it it's not only like we trying to tell you, all right, you can do this. You can actually like get a mentor from a real industry. You'll be matched to someone with your interests. We basically sent out a form to gauge interests and then match them to someone who could really guide them well. And in fact, like that's another thing. Like the fact that so many alumni signed up just to be mentors for a club that they have absolutely no relation with, or to a batch that they owe absolutely nothing to, is kind of huge too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very, very interesting. So I'll follow up with my last question for for today. What advice would you give to students looking to pursue their masters at INSEAD?
Okay, so first of all, I mean, I feel like every master's, I'm sure, has its pros and cons. I'd say weigh them out, weigh out what's more important to you. For me, it was always about having, I mean, there's really no point discussing my personal preferences, but weigh out what's more important to you. Do you want like a 2 year experience? Do you want a shorter experience where it's kind of more condensed and you learn how to, do everything faster, do everything more efficient? Then I mean, at the end of the day, you have to also realize that you're doing this for a specific reason. What is that reason to you? Like, a lot of people could be doing it only for career progression. A lot of people could be doing it, like, I don't know, just to learn something new. They want to explore different fields and see what they want to do. Like, maybe I do a MIM right now, and I think I'm interested in finance, and 15 years down the road, I actually do a PhD in finance. I don't know. So, weigh out what's more important to you and then choose the best school. Don't just go by rankings. Like, personally, I did not care about rankings. If you really want to look at rankings, like INSEAD isn't on a ranking, but I don't think that changes anything. So yeah,
Absolutely.
don't look at rankings, don't look at names. Look at what you're interested in. Look at where you want to be and who you think can provide you the support to be there. And of course, talk to people, reach out to people. I don't know about other schools, but from whatever I've seen in our cohort and Alexandra's cohort, INSEADers are pretty reachable. Like I said, it's probably in the INSEAD environment's air, or I don't know what it is, but yeah, they'd be happy to take up your questions.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Aklit, for sharing your experience with us. We wish you all the best in your endeavors and in your professional path. And let's keep in touch and have a great day in Singapore. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Alexandra. Have a nice day.